Racism today? Yes, there is. Of course there is. I have a theory on how to deal with it at this point, which is different from 1960, which is different from 1870, but today, because there's different stages in a nation's life, I think require different responses.
So how would you deal with it? Because obviously they say there's no racism. It's not a racist country.
So I think right now, I'm not saying this is the answer 60 years ago, but right now, today, I think the right answer is actually to let it atrophy to irrelevance.
Vivek Ramaswamy made another appearance on The Breakfast Club with Charlemagne and DJ Envy. Before this past summer, Vivek was on there talking about his campaign. Now he's on there talking about race. And Charlemagne has been in the news lately because he's been very, very vocal about his hesitancy to support Joe Biden.
You, Charlemagne, I mean, you made some waves in a recent interview saying that you regret endorsing Joe Biden. Why?
It's not that I regret endorsing Joe Biden. It's just that, I think that we all can get burned, by politicians. Because when I say endorsing, I put my name and my reputation on the line with my listeners. And when my listeners feel like he didn't deliver, they come back to me and they say, hey, man, you're the one who told us to vote for, Joe Biden. You're the one who told us to vote for Kamala Harris. So, I care about my listeners and what my listeners think. But I do want to say that, I think President Biden historically has been a lack of a better word, a elected official. But, Donald Trump is the end of democracy as we know it.
The Democrats are not too happy with Charlemagne because of the comments he's made about Joe Biden. But I think what Charlemagne is reflecting is a sentiment that is very, very present. It's like the undercurrent of discontent, especially amongst black men in the black community. That's why it's refreshing when you have people like Vivek go on to the Breakfast Club to talk about things. It's so refreshing because in this day and time, we have to understand something, and I'm going to get to the reaction of the video in a second. Racism is a spirit. Racism is a spirit. Despite all the best efforts throughout the years to eradicate racism in America, it still exists. And as a matter of fact, in some ways, it's getting more and more pervasive based upon all the DEI stuff, all the anti-racist stuff, and the backlash to all that stuff in certain communities, how there's a rise in what I call a second wave of people being upset with black folks because of the DEI, because of affirmative action and all those things. So, with all that being said, racism is a spirit. It's a spirit. It's a spirit of division. It's a spirit that wants to divide people based upon immutable characteristics, your melanin content in your skin. That is so superficial and is based upon a construct that was created by white Americans to separate the people into certain structures to keep black people essentially out of power. That is what racism is. So we have to level set and understand what the definition of racism is racial prejudice, but racism is based on power. So you have to understand that definition before we get into this interview with Vivek and hear what he has to say. So let's react to what Vivek has to say.
Racism today? Yes, there is. Of course there is. I have a theory on how to deal with it at this point, which is different from 1960, which is different from 1870, but today, because there's different stages in a nation's life, I think require different responses.
So how would you deal with it? Because obviously they say there's no racism. It's not a racist country.
So I think right now, I'm not saying this is the answer 60 years ago, but right now, today, I think the right answer is actually to let it atrophy to irrelevance.
So when Vivek, he's coming from a medical background, so he's talking about letting racism atrophy to irrelevance, like it would die on its own. What Vivek doesn't understand is that racism is a spirit, and so you need to attack this thing spiritually. That's when I call upon Christians, the body of Christ, to rise up to actually walk out Acts 17:26, where it says that God has created from one blood all nations and appointed their boundaries and where they're going to live. I implore the church to walk that out, because the solution for racism will not come from the White House. It will not come from Congress. It will not come from the Supreme Court. It comes from the churches of God. It comes from the church, because the church was the one that kept it going in America. A fascinating series for everyone to watch. I recommend you watch it. Is the Race Religion and Racism series that Dr. Fred Price did. I think everybody needs to watch that that's a believer and look at that. So unless churches and pastors really come together, have a heart-to-heart discussion on racism, I don't believe racism would just atrophy on its own.
We are creating new racism today that I believe would not exist if we at a certain point would say we're going to let it go and move on.
Give us an example. Yeah, give us an example.
New racism? New anti-black racism. Huh? A new wave of anti-black racism that I think is beginning in this country because of people's feeling that they are being denied something on the basis of their skin color in the name of these DEI policies. I think that.
Yeah, he's right. He's right. There's a new wave of anti-black racism. And like I said, it's because of the response to DEI. It's your response to affirmative action. Just look at all the people that piled on Claudine Gay, rightfully so, because she was a plagiarist and because she probably didn't get her position based on merit or experience or ability. But nevertheless, look at the people that piled on to Claudine Gay. And look at the reaction to the overturning of affirmative action. And on this channel, people that have been with me for a while, you understand, I'm against affirmative action. I'm against these quotas. I don't believe in systemic racism, institutional racism. Now, do I believe that racism still exists? Of course, racism still exists today. Do I believe that there are people who have racist motives and biases and agendas? Of course they do. You see it every day. I see it every day. I see it in the workplace. I see how people respond to people who don't look like them. So I definitely understand why these things were put in place. But you have to understand the history of DEI and what it's meant to really do. It is really a Marxist construct similar to critical race theory, similar to critical theory, similar to critical legal theory. They're not really intent on elevating black people or minority people. The real intent is to overthrow this nation and to replace it with a Marxist, communist, socialist agenda, with a Marxist, communist, socialist ideology. That's the real threat. That's the real idea behind DEI and all these other policies.
For America, where pharmaceutical companies and other companies say that we need to have quota systems that 25% of our workforce in vice president ranks or above need to be people of a certain skin color. Imagine if we didn't say that, but we just did it by merit. We would probably get to the same place or something darn close to it anyway.
It's refreshing to hear Vivek say that. I have experience in industries where people focus on diversity in the sense of they want to have more and more people reflective of America in certain positions in the upper echelons of a company and the C-suite of a company, for example. But I believe that the way that they're going about it does not always necessitate the best candidate. As a person that leads an organization, as a person that leads an area, I'm always looking for the best candidate. Now, as a black man, do I have an eye out for people that are black? Yes, I have an eye out, but it doesn't mean I discriminate against somebody who is not black. It just means that I want the candidate pool to be so diverse to the point to where we get the best people possible. I don't want to discriminate against anybody based upon their skin tone, because it does bring into question that person's competency. It does bring into question that person's skill set. And that's the last thing. Black people don't want themselves to be questioned as to whether or not. That's called imposter syndrome. A lot of black folks have imposter syndrome because they don't feel like they're adequate enough to be in this position, because sometimes people are elevated solely because of their skin tone or solely because of their genitalia. And that's not the way it should be. It should be solely based upon your ability to do the job in the eyes of the person that's hiring you. And meritocracy is not always 100% accurate, okay? As a person that has hired people in the past, it may not always be meritocracy. It's always about, do you think that person is the best one for the job? And that is what should be done, regardless of genitalia, regardless of skin tone.
So this is not to say that we're going to deny something that's happened in the country, because I think that is an approach some people try to take, denialism, right? Oh, that didn't happen. No, I'm not taking that approach.
That's what Nikki Haley did last week.
Or 2 weeks ago, or whatever it was.
That's what Tim Scott has done. That's what the vice president has done. Joe Biden has done. They all say, oh, America is not a racist country.
Charlamagne, America, the country itself, is not racist. Are there racist people in America? And were there racist people at the founding of America? Yes. You have to separate the two. Were there racist people in America? You can't paint everybody with a broad brush when you say America is a racist country. No, the people in America, I know people will say, well, a country is made up of people. Yes, I would say the government of America has been racist. And the government of America is racist now. But that racism is steered towards black people from the liberal side by patronizing black people, by denying black people the agency that they have, by telling them they can only achieve a certain amount because of their skin tone. That is white supremacy. That is racist. So while I would not say America, the people have been racist, the government has been racist. The government has instituted racist things in the past, and they're still doing racist things right now. Take, for example, all the laws about reproductive freedom. That is racism. That is singling out one race to destroy it. You may disagree with that, but that is what's happening with this reproductive freedom. Think about all the people, think about the majority of people who are going to these facilities to practice their reproductive freedom, if there's a reproductive freedom in what they're doing.
But we will get there one day. And I think that at a certain point when you get there, it's when you're closest to the promised land that there's a temptation to actually focus on where you were at the start. But I think that we have to resist that temptation and say that, you know what? At a certain point in time, it's like when that virus is almost cleared. It's still a little bit of it left, but it's almost cleared, to say that we're going to let it atrophy to irrelevance.
And so this was a great video, a great conversation, and it's refreshing to see that Vivek and Charlemagne and DJ, one thing that I do like about Vivek Ramaswamy, and I've liked this about him ever since he has burst upon the scene as a candidate. This man is not afraid. This man will go to anywhere that will open themselves up to him. He will find an audience anywhere. This man is not a traditional Reagan, Bush, your old school Republicans that don't care about black people, don't care about anybody, that want to keep the tent very, very small for their cabal of elites. And that's one of the things about Trump. That's why people don't understand about Trump. This is what people don't understand, why Trump has this mass appeal, especially to black men. It's because Trump doesn't patronize to black men. Trump doesn't patronize of anyone, period. He doesn't even patronize to, well, yeah, he may patronize a little bit on the evangelical front, because I don't know what Trump is in terms of his relationship with Jesus. But at the same time, Trump does not patronize the black people. And that is refreshing. As a black man, that is refreshing, because all the Democrats do every 2 to 4 years is patronize. You'll see them doing it this year constantly. You already seen Joe Biden do it in South Carolina. They're going to keep doing it because they think of us as victims. They think of black people as lower than them. And so they want to keep this inferiority complex going because it keeps them in power. Does racism exist? Yes, because it's a spirit. How do we fight it? We fight it from the pulpit, from the church, from the body of Christ. That is how you defeat it in America.